and welcome to Myth Monsters. My name is Erin and I'll be your host for these little snack bite-sized podcasts on folklore and mythical monsters from all around the world. These podcasts focus on the actual cryptids, folklore and mythic monsters from global mythology, rather than focusing on the full stories of heroes and their big adventures. I'll also be dropping in some references that you have to recent culture and where you can see these represented in modern day content so that you can learn more and get as obsessed as I am about these absolute legends of the mythological world. Blimey, the summer weather is truly coming in and kicking butt over here in the UK, and I hope it's not too hot wherever you're listening in from, but unfortunately it is that time of year where I become a hermit and live in the dark for 3 months. But I will note that I love shorts, and being warm enough to wear them inside is just wonderful. Anyway, sorry, I naturally fall into talking about the weather. It's a terribly British trait. And this week we are staying in my home zone and travelling over to probably the most unsung hero of the 4 British countries, the beautiful Wales, for a haunting hellhound, the Cŵn Annwn. Now before we start, I need to make something very clear. I do not speak Welsh. It's quite a hard language to follow and learn, and even just pick up the basics if you've never learnt it before. So my pronunciations might not be the best. I promise I have tried and researched, and this is my attempt, so please keep that in mind. Don't roast me in the comments, that would be great. I have truly tried. I want to do a big thanks to Cŵn and Charlotte Williams this week for recommending the Welsh Monsters too. I think it's about time we covered one, so let's throw ourselves straight in. So, the Cŵn Annwn were specifically described as spectral hounds, or spirit hounds, sometimes even described as fairy hounds. Of course, they are large dogs, but stand out with sheer white fur, glowing white eyes like moonbeams, and bright red ears. In some parts of Wales they are described as smaller dogs with patches of white and red on their fur, or sometimes fully purple, other times entirely flame-coloured. There were variants that were more sinister to look at, described as black and very ugly, with huge red spots, or red in body with large black patches like splashes of ink, or the worst one, which was blood red, dripping with gore, with eyes like balls of liquid fire. So you could go from basically a cute white doggy or a very stereotypical gory hellhound. Technically though, they were hellhounds, and that's what they're most commonly described as within Welsh folklore. They came from the Welsh underworld of Annwn, hence the name, where they were hunting dogs for the king of the underworld, Arthurian. Much like the Norse pantheon with Odin leading the charge, Arthurian would lead a wild hunt around Cadair Idris, which is a mountain range in Wales, with his hounds that only answered to him, looking for wrongdoers to take back to the underworld with him. The underworld in Welsh mythology is called Annwn, but it's also known as the Otherworld rather than the Underworld. I'm using Underworld because we all know what that means. Otherworld might imply Fey lands or anything like that, so I just want to be clear that we're talking about the Underworld here, so I'll be using that terminology. They only hunted in certain circumstances though, which were the evenings of St John's Day, St Martin's Day, St Michael the Archangel's Day, All Saints' Day, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, St Agnes's Day, St David's Day, and Good Friday. Or just in the autumn and winter. Who knows which one? Some experts do say though that Arthurian only hunted from Christmas to the 12th night, but it sounds like they hunt all the time, honestly. The hounds were seen as a death omen and as escorts of souls to the underworld. If you were to see the hunt in full swing and go and look out of curiosity, you would be torn to pieces by the dogs. And I have a quote here about it. Blood falls in showers like rain, human bodies are torn to pieces, and death soon follows the victim of the nocturnal expedition. However, it was more likely that if the hunt came to you, you didn't realise that you were in fact a wrongdoer. They're the only people they hunted. It was said that a Cŵn Annwn's goal in the wild hunt is to hunt those wrongdoers into the ground until they can no longer run, just as those criminals did to their victims. If you saw the hunt and were not tempted to have a look, firstly, well done you. It was said that you would be haunted by death, and soon it would come to you or someone around you, which is the whole omen part. The hounds could be spotted on their own, or with the hunt themselves, but either way, it's not a good thing to see, bar how cool that would be. You could also be cursed with the omen if you heard the hounds on their own. Their growling is the loudest when they are at a distance, and strangely, as they draw closer, it grows softer and softer and quieter and quieter. Now, they don't have any specific powers, bar that they were able to tear humans apart, but I think any large dog could probably do that if they wanted to, and we all know that they have. Their powers are probably more to do with the fact that they can move in and out of the underworld, and are technically spirits, so are completely invulnerable and immortal. So if you did find yourself face to face with one, you would be going back to the underworld with them. There is no denying that. Now, because they're spirits, we don't know what they eat or how they reproduce. We assume that they do neither. But we also assume that there is a dog criteria for hellhounds, and they are either underworld born or spirits of dogs who have died in actuality, warped for the wild hunt. But we are generally not sure, so on we go. Speaking of which, let's move on to etymology. Cŵn Annwn is Welsh, of course, and it literally means hounds of Annwn, or hounds of the underworld, very literally. They were also sometimes known as the Cŵn Mamau, meaning hounds of the mothers, and I will get into why later. Now, for this monster's history, we have to go back to Celtic Britain originally. If you don't know much about the Celts, let me give you an overview. The Celts came to the British Isles in the Iron Age, which was around 750 BC, and they ran the island until the Romans invaded in 1 AD. Their religion was mostly druidic and pagan, and they believed in the spiritual and natural world, much like other pagans, with a group of pantheon gods, much like the ancient Greek, Roman, Norse or Egyptians. When the Romans took over, the Celts were mostly wiped out, but the ones who survived went to Wales, Scotland, Cornwall and Cumbria, and also Breton, which is a region of France. If you're not familiar as well, Cornwall and Cumbria are English counties, Cornwall in the south, Cumbria in the north, just in case you didn't know. The Celtic language is really the only thing that lives on in the modern day, within the Welsh, Cornish, Cumbric and Breton languages, which is why it's difficult for anyone outside of those regions to pick it up, as it's not massively taught anywhere else, firstly, but also the root language base no longer exists. Celtic does not exist, and it's easier to learn languages that already have existing bases, such as English with a Germanic base or French with a Romantic base, for instance. Welsh, Cornish, Cumbric, Breton are much harder to pick up. Anyway, that's all important because Welsh folklore was born from the Celtic traditions and beliefs, meaning that the underworld was a place and a king ruled it, loved to hunt, another unfortunately British tradition, and so the hellhounds of Annwn were born, and most likely before we have written record of them existing too within the Iron Age. So in terms of when they really came into existence, we don't know. It's probably somewhere after 750 BC, but before 1 AD. The Celts also believed that colours were really important. They believed that red was associated with death and white was associated with the supernatural, so white animals were very often owned by gods or lived in that underworld, which suits our monster. Our first written record of them, though, was in a book called the Mabinogion from the 12th or 13th century. These were a bunch of prose stories from the earliest Welsh people, much like the Poetic Edda from the Norse. This is one of the earliest texts that we have of culture and folklore. And it included a story about the Cŵn Annwn, and it tells the story of the Prince of Dyfed seeing the Cŵn Annwn whilst hunting with his own dogs, and he describes them as such. Then looked he at the colour of the dogs, staying not to look at the stag, and of all the hounds that he had seen in the world, he had never seen any that were like unto these. For their hair was of a brilliant shining white, and their ears were red, and as the whiteness of their body shone, so did the redness of their ears glisten. Funnily enough though, the term hellhound for these dogs came in around the same time when the Christians dubbed them the Hounds of Hell, and believed that they were not owned by Arthurian, but by Satan, and were connected to the fiery depths of hell in Christian belief. We see this a lot in folklore, with Christianity deeming a lot of the pagan and ancient traditions of other cultures as demonic. However, in Welsh folklore, Annwn was a place of plenty and eternal youth, not some fiery chasm, which again is very similar to many other ancient religious beliefs too, such as the Greek underworld being made of multiple layers and most of them being pretty nice. I do have some stories about the hunt and Arthurian, and one of them goes back to an excerpt I read a moment ago about that prince. Prince Cŵn actually meets Arthurian in this story, and the hounds attempt to take down a stag that was the prince's original target, and he ends up sending his own hounds to scare off the Cŵn Annwn, and in repentance is asked to defeat Arthurian's greatest enemy, Halfdan, which is the other king of Annwn. In a later story, the prince does indeed defeat Halfdan, and everyone celebrates Arthurian as the true king of the underworld. This is not Arthurian's only story though, as in Arthurian legend, he was dethroned by another man, Cŵn Annwn, the fairy king. He took the throne from him as well as his hunting hounds, and took over as master of the hunt too. Eventually, the hero Cilchw takes 2 of the hellhounds to ride with him to King Arthur's court after completing his own Heracles' labours, which is a whole other mythical story I won't get into. If you want to look into it, please feel free. I'm not going to go into it here. We don't talk about heroes here. Lastly, I mentioned that they were also considered hounds of the mothers earlier, and this is because sometimes instead of Arthurian, they were accompanied by a super powerful hag called Nos, or Matilda of the Night. She would help chase sorrowful and lost souls to the hunt, and she would drive the hounds with her own shrieks and wails. The story is that she was once this beautiful woman who loved hunting so much that she once exclaimed, "If there is no hunting in heaven, then I would rather not go." And so, she was cursed to stay, and now eternally cries out in misery as she hunts forever with these hellhounds. Now, in reality, what could these hellhounds be? Well, there's actually a really well thought out answer here, in mythology but also throughout culture, and it's geese. Yep, you heard me right, geese, as in the plural of goose. This is because when geese migrate, they honk over the sky, and sometimes this honking can sound so much like growls, especially dependent on the distance they are away from you, that apparently it was very, very easy back in the day to think that you were being growled at, when actually it was a bunch of geese flying over the top of you. Hilarious, but it's actually really discussed by experts, this. Now, for mythical comparisons, we have a load from other countries from within the UK, such as the Gabrielle hounds, ratchets and yell hounds, and there is actually a ghostly mythical hunter called Herne the Hunter that one day I will make sure to cover. He is technically just a ghost, but he is maybe one of my favourite British mythological figures, and they are all to do with these extra wild hunt dogs, hellhound style vibes from all of these ones as well. As well as that, of course, we have the wild hunt themselves from Norse mythology too, which I've covered in another episode if you want to know more about the hunt in general. But there is also the Cŵn Sheed, which I think is the most like the Cŵn Annwn in Scottish and Irish mythology. a mythical hound that haunts the Highlands and would let out only 3 barks. Anyone who heard them would have to find safety before the 3rd bark, or they would be overcome with fear and die from it. All fun. I actually wish that we could cover this one in another episode, but there's not enough information about it to fill out a 5-minute episode, let alone a 15-minute one, so that's probably all you're going to hear about that one, which is very sad, but super interesting nonetheless. Now, let's move on to modern media. There's not very much today, as you can imagine, specifically for the Cŵn Annwn, but I filled this with a whole load of hellhound media, so you might remember some of these from our other hellhound-esque episodes, like the Cadejo and Garm. For art, starting strong with a load of independent stuff that I really like. I love Doghead by Julia de Graag for this one, or Kinviber by Katie Jones, and she's a Manchester-based artist, but we don't have any portrait art of these ones at all, so have a look at your independent work like these ones I've mentioned for a great and really accurate depiction of them within modern art. In movies, we have All Dogs Go to Heaven, Hercules, Scoob, Where the Dead Go to Die, The Lost Boys, Scooby-Doo, Wishmaster, The Never-Ending Story, Jonah Hex, Hellboy, The Chronicles of Riddick, The Bye-Bye Man, Ghostbusters, Dark Angel the Ascent, Predators, Never Cry Werewolf, Black Dog, and An American Haunting. For TV, we have Mystery Science Theatre 3000, Two Stupid Dogs, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, The Owl House, Phineas and Ferb, League of Super Evil, Fangbone, Mr. Pickles, Hell of a Boss, Has-Been Hotel, Teen Wolf, What We Do in the Shadows, Rescue Me, Kolchak the Night Stalker, Reaper, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Ultraman Nexus, Supernatural, Chrono Crusade, Black Butler, Digimon, One Piece, Naruto, Hellsing, and Berserk. For video games, we have ones such as Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, Diablo, Apocalypse, Total War Warhammer, Smite, RuneScape, Quest 64, Penumbra, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Devil May Cry, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Nightmare Creatures, Monster Hunter, Dungeon Keeper, Shadowgate, League of Legends, Deadly Premonition, Kingdom Hearts 2, Heroes of Might and Magic, Odin Sphere, Fire Emblem, Sacred Stones, Pokemon, The Elder Scrolls, Dragon's Crown, Shadow Hearts, Doom Eternal, Fallout 4, Secret of Mana, Bounty of One, and Age of Wonders. Now, moving on to my book recommendation this week, it is for British Goblins, Welsh Folklore, Fairy Mythology, Legends and Traditions by Wirt Sykes. This book is from the 1800s, so it's much older, and it's about most of the Welsh monsters that we cover, as well as our hellhounds this week. Or for your more modern reads, you can have a look at Welsh Monsters and Mythical Beasts, a guide to legendary creatures from Celtic, Welsh myth and legend by Rowan Ellis and Stephanie Law, Welsh Fairy Tales, Myths and Legends by Claire Fyers, or Welsh Folk Tales by Peter Stevenson for some more modern Welsh monsters and fairy tales. But now it's time for Do I Think They Existed? I really don't know, in all honesty, with this one. My reasons are that they only come around so often. There could totally be a dog-like carrier to the underworld in my eyes, especially if they're ghost doggies. And people see black dog symbols all the time, and it's ghostly, so naturally I'm pulled to a maybe here. On the other side of that argument is, do you believe there is a ghostly hunt roaming the mountains of Wales? Well, maybe is my answer there too. So maybe I'm leaning more towards yes? They are a fascinating monster, older than so many other mythological monsters we've covered, and are yet to cover in just the British Isles. So I'm pretty sure that they'll stick around either way that I decide. I generally love the idea of a wild hunt, be that in Norse mythology or in this one. The idea of this massive hunting party in the sky, scooping up all the bad people destined to die that day. Love it. I'm all for a street cleanup. Now we just need one that goes across the whole world like Santa, picking them up to take them to the bad place. What an experience that would be. I also really like hellhounds as a mythical beast. I think they're really cool, and I think this one is no exception. And I like that these are so different visually. This white and red dog rather than the stereotypical demon dog that's on fire. It's a really nice change, you know? But what do you think? Did the Cŵn Annwn roam the Welsh countryside? Let me know on social media. I would really love to know what you think about this one. What a fun one to cover. Again, excuse the terrible Welsh pronunciations. I tried my best with the resources I had at hand. I love a hellhound, so I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did and enjoyed going over to a much more understated mythos from the beautiful Wales this week. If you can ever get over to Wales, if you're visiting the UK and you're like, I just want to go to London, go outside of London, please. And please, please go on over to Wales. It is the most beautiful place, just as Scotland and Ireland are as well. I really, really recommend getting out of the south of England. Please go have a look and adventure across the UK. Please, please, please. Now, I am off, woohoo, until June, because I am going to Disney World for 2 weeks, catching the opening of the brand new Epic Universe at Universal, and I am unbelievably excited. I take off on Saturday, you're hearing this on Thursday, so very exciting. Anything mythical or monstrous will be captured on film and sent out via my social media, I assure you, but just to be clear, there will be no episodes during the next 2 weeks. Of course, if you see me about, if you're also in Disney World or around the Orlando area and spot me, please come and say hello. I would love to introduce myself and talk about monsters. When we're back, we are heading over to the US, funnily enough, for a horrifying, armless alien cryptid, one that I've never heard of and have been suggested to cover, the Fresno Nightcrawlers. Now come and debunk this alien phenomenon with me when we are back on the 5th of June. I'm very excited to have a look into it with you. For now though, thank you so much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a rating on the service you are listening on. I've got loads of social media for any questions or suggestions on what monsters to cover next, and I'd really love to hear from you. The social media handles for TikTok, YouTube and Instagram are Myth Monsters Podcast, and the Twitter is Myth Monsters Pod, but you can also find me on Blue Sky under Myth Monsters as well. All of our content can be found at mythmonsters.co.uk, and you can find us on Good Pods, Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon if you want to help me fund the podcast too. Come join the fun though, share this with your pals, they might love me as much as you do. And over the next 2 weeks, stay safe, stay spooky, and I'll see you later, babes.